This episode of the EuroPuck podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. Now, March Madness and the big basketball tournament in North America is getting ever so close. I think it's about a week away, less than a week to go. That doesn't mean we have to wait for the fun to happen too, folks. With DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, they're giving you the chance for all new players to cash $100. All you have to do is bet $1 on any team to hit a three-pointer in any basketball game this week. Any basketball game that's taking place this week, if you bet $1, they hit a three-pointer, you cash in $100. And if your team makes it rain, you get $100, folks. That's a pretty good deal to me. This offer won't be around for long, folks, so head on over to your phone's app store right now, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, and get in on all the action. If basketball isn't your kind of thing, though, and you're interested in other sports as well, they also have daily odds on hockey, which you know we love here, soccer, and so much more. So make sure you check them out and make it rain on whatever sport is your go-to. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN to get your shot to turn $1 into $100 when you bet on any team to hit a three-pointer in a basketball game this week. That's promo code THPN to turn $1 into $100 via three-pointer in any basketball game this week. For a limited time, only available at DraftKings Sportsbook. A big thank you to DraftKings for sponsoring this episode. Hello, bonjour, hello, hi, heya, and privyet, hockey fans. Welcome back to the EuroPuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network, as brought to you by DraftKings. My name is Hayden, or Odd Man Rush, as you can see up there on the video version. I'm back, guys. Hi, how's it going? It's been a little while, hasn't it? And joining me, of course, is the guy that managed to take the show last week when I wasn't here, Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris.
Hello, for once the technical problems weren't my fault. And I absolutely, it was like, oh, I've got to do the podcast on my own, but I'm feeling very smug that the technical problems weren't my fault for once.
But like the worst bit about it was like we were halfway through recording our previous episode. Because Chris mentioned it obviously last week. I did tune into the episode last week, you know, Chris. Wanted to make sure it was all good and it all worked okay. And I think you did a fabulous job. So thank you for holding down the fort while I wasn't here. I was super busy editing my video that went out last weekend and just didn't have time to step in and get it done. But so our plan last week, as Chris mentioned in the episode, Chris and I were going to sit down and spend the entire episode going through the final 2020/21 KHL regular season standings. We were sat there talking about each of the different teams. We'd got through all the teams that didn't make the playoffs, talked about their top scorers, the kind of runs of form they had throughout the regular season, and essentially did a post-mortem on those teams. And we were about to move on to the teams that had made the playoffs, kind of been like, this is how they got to the berth or their seeding in the playoffs, and this is how they got to that point. But unfortunately, I decided to open about 15 tabs on my Google Chrome all at the same time, and my computer was like, I don't like this idea, so I'm going to crash your computer, and it didn't save any of the recording. It was completely corrupted. But we're back here now, guys. I've returned.
He's back.
Indeed. So this week, we've actually got quite a few interesting things to talk about this week because we have the playoffs taking place both in the KHL and several other leagues across Europe. Another league has finished the regular season and their playoffs start very soon. I am wearing my Champions Hockey League Rungsted Capitals jersey because, you know, Rungsted are doing very well this year. And for those of you who don't know, I did a video last week. It was about this time last week. I released a video where the general manager of the Rungsted Capitals sent me a jersey. It was very nice of them. So, you know, I thought I'd rep it on the podcast because we talk about all things Europe. I love the fact that it's a Champions Hockey League one as well. I really can't complain about that. And we're going to be talking about the Danish Metaligaen because as far as Chris told me, so if he's wrong, don't quote me on it, but I believe we've double-checked everything. We've double-checked all the stats. Chris is our stats guy. He's double-checked everything. And the Danish Metaligaen is adding themselves to the list of leagues that are going to be finished by the time this episode goes up. So lots of playoff hockey to go. But anyway, Chris, how are you doing today? I feel like I just needed to clean up shop a little bit, clarify a few things. Now that I'm back, I've rambled a little bit. You know I'm back, folks. So Chris, how you doing?
Yes, not too bad. Not too bad, really. Just another day of work, but I've managed to have a day of work where I'm not just sat at this computer all day, which is obviously very pleasant. Getting full back into the swing of it now with the Lions and ice hockey. We've got obviously Elite League stuff, so things are starting to ramp up here again in the UK, which is nice. We've got leagues around Europe finishing. We've got teams qualifying for the Champions Hockey League is what I was going to say.
It's okay, take your time. I mumble all the time as well.
for next season, we've got 5 teams qualified there next season as well, which we'll cover as we go through the leagues. And yeah, it's all been kind of pretty busy and fun, and things are seeming a little bit more normal. The schools are back here in the UK as well, which means the traffic is worse. But you know.
I mean, luckily for us, like the both of us, that doesn't really mean anything for us now.
For me, no.
You know, like how back in the day when obviously you go to school, you know, like all the different holidays that you have. Like here in the UK, we have Easter holiday, we have like half terms.
I don't know when they are.
No, I've completely forgotten. Like my there's a couple of members of my family that are either like still in education or working within education, and the only way I know is when they don't go to work one day and they're like, oh yeah, we're on like Easter holiday.
It's inset day. It's half term.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, we've got a day off because the kids aren't going back yet. I'm like, oh, is it? Okay.
So here's story time with Chris.
Let's
my
go for
school was 20 odd mile away from my house.
Okay.
It was in another county.
Okay.
And the bus used to pick me up at the earliest was like 7:10.
Yeah.
I think by last year it was like 7:20, and we'd be at school for 8:00 because the bus would then do the primary schools.
That was my uni experience. Every morning, 7:00 bus. Yeah, it was the worst.
Yeah. So I would get to school at like 8:00.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if it was, bad weather, snow, the school said, we will endeavour to let all parents know that school is closed by 8:20.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would, get on the bus, drive to school, get dropped off at school in 6 inches of snow. And then 10 minutes after we were at the school, just standing around in the playground, the teacher would go, oh yeah, school's shut. It's like, great, thanks. Our parents are now all at work.
Yeah.
And now can't come and get us. So we just had to hang around in the town all day for the bus that might or might not be able to take us home again.
That's the worst. See, like with my experience with uni, because I did a performing arts degree, it was very much like very practical, and we all worked, like there was only a group of 7 or 8 of us, and we all worked very closely together. It was very practical based, lots of rehearsals, lots of working time that was kind of on us. Like if we didn't do it, at the end of the day, it only affected us. Because you're like 18 to 21, so it's like you're not children anymore. Like, come on, figure it out, guys. So if the bus like didn't turn up or was really late or there was snow or whatever, it was more of an annoyance than like, yes, no school today. It was more like, damn it.
We had it once where they decided that school was going to be cancelled while we were on the bus there. And we told the driver, but he was like, yeah, but I can't turn around because I've got other schools to go and do.
Oh,
so
no.
We got to the next bus stop. Everyone had rung their parents. We got to the next bus stop and basically everybody got off and just hung around in this village that was halfway between us and school so we could go and get picked up.
Yeah, it's like the only time you've ever been to that village ever in your life. It's one that you like always drive through. You've never stopped there to kind of see what's going on because it's kind of like a place locked in time. I know exactly what you're talking about, Chris. But speaking of winter weather and all of that stuff, and ice more specifically, let's talk about the sport of ice hockey, shall we, Chris? Because I love the fact that we're now starting to get to the point where we're sharing a few more interesting stories. But then I look at how long we have been spent talking about them. It's like
10 minutes recording, we haven't even started.
Yeah, literally. So anyway, we're going to take you through the playoffs We're going to take you through all the leagues that have already started or are about to start the playoffs first. And then the league that's very close to starting the playoffs, and then taking you through the rest of the leagues that like we usually do. Now, Chris obviously last week explained to you all the final standings in the KHL regular season. So we're just going to take you through the playoff standings because there are some games being played today. I don't have their live scores up here now. For context, it's the 9th of March today. So this is my first episode in the month of March. God. You know,
it is.
And we're already 10 days in. How crazy is that? So we have in the Eastern Conference, I always get confused with the KHL. The Eastern Conference, we have the first seeded Akbars Kazan, 3-0 up on Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod. We have Avangard Omsk against Avtomobilist, a 3-1 series lead. So No sweep there taking place. I'm pretty sure all the games yesterday, there were 2 or 3 opportunities for a chance for the higher seeded team to sweep, but they didn't manage to get it done, so most of the teams held on to fight another day. Then Magnitogorsk against Baris, it's a 2-2 series tie. That's one of the more interesting first round series we've seen so far. Salavat Yuleev against Traktor Chelyabinsk, a 3-1 series lead for Salavat. CSKA Moscow against Spartak Moscow. I believe that, as well as the Akbars Kazan game, are both going on later today, or as we're recording this. 3-0 series lead over Spartak Moscow, so the Moscow rivalry very much in favour of the regular season champions, which I think we all expected. SK St. Petersburg, they were 3 games to nothing up last night. However, they took a 1-0 lead in that game, but Dynamo Minsk came back, scored 2 solid goals, and they managed to live to fight another day. But I will say about that series, because I'm a St. Petersburg fan, primarily in the KHL, I follow what they're doing. I have flash scores, letting me know about the scores and everything. Dynamo Minsk have put up a solid fight in that series. Several of the games have been 1 goal differentials, overtime games. There was at one point where St. Petersburg, I think, went up 4-1 in the game, and Minsk managed to tie it before it was won 5-4 by St. Petersburg. So whether it becomes... Yeah, something like that. Yeah, you're right. So... it may see 3-1 series lead for St. Petersburg, but that's been a hard-fought series by Minsk. They've never made the second round of the playoffs, but they've given it a really good try, and I wouldn't be surprised if they stole another game or 2 in that series. Then you've got Dynamo Moscow and Sevastopol Sharapovets, 3-1 series lead for Moscow. Dmitry Yaskin, leading goal scorer, has been playing very well for them. And then Lokomotiv against Jokerit, a really interesting situation developing there, with Lokomotiv up 3-0 over Jokerit, which I'm quite surprised about. Obviously the 4-5 seed, but also I'm kind of surprised to see Jokerit down 3 games already. So Chris, those are the current series standings in the KHL. What are your thoughts?
I was about to say exactly the same thing as you. I mean, there's not a huge amount to discuss, so I've only written a couple of lines. I've put everything's running to form, higher seed beating lower seed everywhere except the one matchup where it's tied.
Yeah.
So, it's all kind of going to what you would expect. The one series that is surprising me, and you've just said it there, is Jokerit finding themselves 3-0 down. I was a little bit surprised at that. What is even kind of more surprising when you look into it even further is that they actually didn't score in the first 2 games. They got shut out twice.
Yes.
1-0 and then 5-0. So, it was really I'm quite surprised at that one. That's the one that's really surprising me. Akbars doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Neither does the Avant-Garde game. The 3rd versus 6th, Metallurg and Baris Nur Sultan, they've been quite kind of back and forth, really, and they've been quite some tight games. So we could end up with something there. Salavat Yuleev and Traktor Chelyabinsk as well. Again, there, Traktor on their home ice have not scored in the last 2 games.
Wow.
They got shut out 4-0 and shut out 3-0. So they're really struggling as well. Again, Spartak doesn't surprise me. St. Petersburg doesn't surprise me. And Dynamo Moscow doesn't surprise me. So no, I think it won't be too long until the first round is done. And then once we get into those top seeds, where particularly in the West, 1st versus 4th, 2nd versus 3rd, we'll have much closer matchups, particularly, as I mentioned last week, St. Petersburg, yes, they've got the 2nd seed, but they're actually only like the 6th best team in the league and actually only the 4th best team in the West. So they would go into that game, you would think, based on league form, as kind of the underdogs in that one, which is kind of surprising to say for St. Petersburg.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, obviously, like I said, I follow St. Petersburg more closely. It's really good to see some of their guys actually step up, because I found with St. Petersburg this season, they haven't really had that go-to goal-scoring guy. Like, they didn't have anyone close to a point per game this season, which for a team that's sitting in the 2nd seed in their conference, that's kind of strange to see. But the fact they've got some of their guys that have really stepped up, I believe they had a hat trick in game 2 or 3. Don't quote me on that though. But then there's a couple of other stats that I wanted to mention that I've seen on the KHL's social media pages as the first round has gone on. In the Avant-Garde Omsk, the Omsk Avto Mobilist series, the 2 ones I wanted to highlight. The first one being Ilya Kovalchuk, obviously mid-season acquisition acquisition by Avangard, 36, 37-year-old forward. He's over a point per game in this series. I believe he has 5 points in 4 games, which is super impressive. Like the head coach of Avangard, Bob Hartley, former NHL coach, said he looks like he's like a 22-year-old out there. He's like not sweating at all. Like he just knows what he's doing, and he's being a clutch player for their team. But also, interestingly, in game 4 of that series, I believe it was the one that Avtomobilist won to avoid being swept. The Avtomobilist netminder Jakub Kovar made 55 saves in that game, which is a career high in game 4 against Avangard Omsk. So that's really crazy. And like you mentioned, you got to give props to the Lokomotiv netminder Eddie Pasquale, 2 consecutive shutouts, and then the Salovat Yuleev netminder, 2 consecutive shutouts, which is absolutely incredible. Like, it's all these crazy stories that you see. We know that the KHL has been quite a top-heavy league, both during the regular season and during the playoffs for the last few years now. The hard salary cap they brought in for this year will hopefully change that in the next couple of years as the teams and the league gets fully adjusted to that kind of system. Hopefully we won't see as many sweeps take place within the first round of the playoffs, and it's more competitive in the regular season. But other than kind of the Lokomotiv Jokerit series, which is, like we've both said, a massive surprise, the other kind of series are going relatively how we would have expected them to, especially when both the first seeds have the chance to sweep the 8th seeds. Both 2nd and 7th seeds will probably go to 5 games, maybe 6. I'd actually kind of be surprised if we see a 7-game series in this first round. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I think the only one that's going to go that way, if you think that, is the Metallurg Barrisner Sultana are tied at 2.
Yeah.
That's the only kind of one. It'll be interesting, actually. Remind me at the end of today's podcast, just to jump back to this, because we've got games going on at the minute which are kind of early on in the second.
Right.
And like Lokomotiv and Jokerit, they're playing game 4 and Lokomotiv are winning.
Wow.
Akbars Kazan and Nizhny Novgorod are playing game 4 and Akbars are winning.
Right.
So that, if we come back to it at the end, the games will have, in 20, 30, like in about an hour's time, we probably will just be about finishing up. And those games will be right on the verge of finishing. So we might have those sweeps by the end of this recorded podcast.
Fair enough. And then next week we can round up all the other leagues and all the other series that have probably been finished.
Same with the CSKA Moscow game as well, because CSKA Moscow just tied that up at 1 and they're midway through the second as well. So if they win that one, they'll have done the sweep as well. So yeah, we'll come back to it at the end if we remember, and
of course,
and see if those games have finished and if we've got the sweep. So
yeah, so we might need to get some brooms out by the end of this episode, which, it's always fun to see a sweep in the playoffs. Hopefully we don't see any later on in the rounds, because you don't want to see the first seed sweep the second seed in the finals or something like that. That's just not exciting hockey. In the first round, you're all for it. Let's go for it, guys. So that's obviously the biggest league that's currently in the playoffs. The Swedish Hockey League, the Finnish Liga aren't quite in the playoffs yet, but we're still going to talk about them a little bit later. Let's move on to the Ice Hockey League, which is the Austrian league.
Your favourite league.
My favourite league. I'm just glad that Black Wings Linz didn't make the playoffs. That's all I care about.
Literally, I was watching it. It went to penalty shots, and I was with one of my friends who does NIHL, Banners on the Wall, who does NIHL podcast, who he speaks German as well. So he was like watching it with me, and it was if Villach had lost that penalty shootout, they'd have got in. Black Wings would have got in, and it literally, I think it came down to, I have to remind myself, it came down to it came down to score difference was the tiebreaker, but then the score difference was the same as well. And I think it came down to, I'm making an assumption, but I'm pretty sure it came down to goals scored, because Villach scored 38, Black Wings scored 36. And even if you look at the games, I thought, does it then go down to head-to-head? But I was like, no, because it can't go down to head-to-head because they both won 1 each and the aggregate score was the same as well. So literally, I was like, the only thing, because Black Wings actually won more games in regulation as well. So I was like, well, it's not even that. The only thing that Villach have got through on, I think, is because they scored 38 and Black Wings scored 36. That was the only difference.
Wow. So they were 3 goals away from making it to the playoffs. That must be so irritating.
It's not even so much that. If they hadn't have won the penalty shootout and got the extra point in the final game against Dornbirn, they'd have missed out by the point.
Yeah.
Just that penalty shootout.
Yeah, good point. I've had my thoughts about Black Wings Linz, obviously, during this winners-losers stage, and the fact that I don't think they should take part. But I just want to put it out there, no hard feelings to their team. Like, it's not that I despise their team or anything, it's just the whole layout and the fact that they were the lowest seed, and I personally didn't think that the lowest seed should make the playoffs. It wasn't so much that I dislike Black Wings Linz personally, it's more the system in place. So hard luck to Black Wings. I'm sure they'll be able to come back and have a decent season next year. We obviously noticed that the Graz 99ers didn't make the playoffs, which is a bit of a shame, but what can you do? So just to round up to inform you of the playoff brackets, then Chris, you've mentioned that you've tallied up all of the numbers for if it were carried on the regular season. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So the quarterfinal round, so the first round of the playoffs, first of 3 rounds, you have the first seeded HC Bolzano against the Bratislava Capitals, who are the 6th seed. You have Klagenfurt, the 2nd seed, taking on the 8th seed Villach. You have a Red Bull Salzburg taking on Dornbirn, the 3rd and 7th seed, and then the Vienna Capitals and Feuerwehr AV19, the 4th and 5th seeds. So, do we know when the playoffs starts with the Austrian League?
Can find it out for you.
Because I have no idea, I've got to be honest.
They all start on the 12th, which is what? Friday night.
Okay, so they start as this podcast goes out, the day of. So that's pretty cool. So hope next week we'll be able to talk about some either leads or some ties. And, yep, makes sense. So we'll be able to have a little chat. So Chris, anyway, take us through the standings. Explain what you're going to do now, because some people might have forgotten, and then take us through it.
I'll just make a note on the playoffs. Austrian Ice Hockey League does pick your own opponent.
Yes.
Which is why Bolzano, who were the 1st seed, aren't playing the 8th seed because they chose Bratislava.
That's a good point.
Klagenfurt then decided, okay, well, we'll take the lowest seed we've got, which is Villach in 8th. Salzburg went, well, we'll take the lowest seed that we can, which is Dornbirn, who in 7th. And then obviously Vienna and Feuerwehr get whatever's left. So we've got, if we've got Feuerwehr and I'm gonna have to have a look back and remind myself of which ones they were. So you've got Feuerwehr, you've got Bratislava, and Villach, I think it was, who are the non-Austrian sides,
right,
in the Austrian league. So we've got, I wonder who's going to get the Austrian champions. Oh, it's Bolzano, isn't it? Italian. Who's going to get the Austrian champions trophy that we discussed before? So winners and losers stage is complete, and we've had the pick your own opponent, which I've just gone through.
Yes.
So what I said I would do is have a look at what the final standings were with regards to what they would have been at the end of the main stage. So at the end of the 40 games, I made a note of the standings.
Yep.
And now I've made a note of the standings at the end of the playoffs so we can see what the differences are.
Yeah.
So I'll do that first, and then I'll go into stage 2.
Okay.
So the differences are, at the top, Salzburg and Feuerwehr have swapped. So Salzburg have gone from 5th to 3rd, Feuerwehr have gone from 3rd to 5th, and Vienna have stayed in 4th. The top 2 remain the same. And then lower down, you've got Bratislava and Dornbirn have swapped. So they've gone from 6th to 7th and 7th to 6th.
Okay.
Villach got up 2 places into that final playoff spot. Graz went down 3 places to the bottom. Black Wings went up 2 and Innsbruck went down 1. So there was more movement at the bottom than the top.
Yeah.
Now, I also took out those bonus points you got at the start of the at the start of the winners and losers stage, and then took the points from that winners and losers stage from purely the games and added them into the end of the main stage to find out what the league would look like.
Yes.
And it's relatively similar. So Bolzano would still be top, a 2-point victory over Klagenfurt.
Wow.
So that would be, they went from a 3-point lead to a 2-point lead.
Okay, not a huge difference then.
No. Salzburg again climbed up to 3rd, even with the games. So again, stuck the same as what it was. But this time Feuerwehr didn't drop. So you've got Salzburg on 82 in 3rd, Feuerwehr in 81 in 4th, and Vienna Capitals on 80 in 5th.
Okay,
so
interesting.
Salzburg climbed 2 places and everyone else just shuffled down. So there's not really much change at the top. Dornbirn would have stayed in 6th, not dropped to 7th.
Okay.
Bratislava would have stayed 7th rather than climbed to 6th. And then Innsbruck would have climbed 1 place into that final playoff spot. And then Graz would have swapped with them in 9th because they're on 60 points. They would have been tied with Villach, but they were higher on the head-to-head games. And then Black Wings would have stayed in 11th on 54 points. So Black Wings would have gone from, 17 points outside the playoffs to 8 points outside the playoffs.
Okay.
So based on that, you've only really got people moving. Salzburg would have climbed 2 places, and Innsbruck and Graz 99ers would have swapped. That's the only thing, had there not been the bonus points in the winners and losers stage, that would have changed. So barely anything, really.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, barely anything would have changed. And really not that much has changed over the course of the winners and losers stage. Although I was the jury was kind of out of it for me when I first started, having now been watching and obviously having, for want of a better phrase, like a vested interest in Black Wings purely because I wanted to see them make the playoffs, because I wanted it to wind you up. Did make it a lot more exciting. It really did.
I've got to say, that's the best motivation for anything, Chris. To wind someone up is the best motivation you can ask for. Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Like, if you're rooting for the underdog and they start to go on a bit of a winning streak, that they might get to the point where they're, like you mentioned, Black Wings Linz was so close to making the playoffs and it only came down to a couple of goals or a shootout. To decide.
Literally came down to extra penalty shots they needed as well. So
yeah, exactly. So I can certainly see the intrigue or or why people enjoy the way that they do their league.
Yeah.
I guess it's just kind of like I don't know. I'm not going to say hockey purist in me, because I think that's a little bit too like patronizing to the people that don't agree. It's more so like, I don't know. It's one of those situations where, like, you're so used to having it, like the traditions of hockey, like you're so used to having it like done a certain way, that seeing it done a different way and then the explanation behind it is kind of like, really? Like, are we sure about that? But regardless, they seem to have it going on there in the Austrian league, in the ice hockey league. And next week we'll be able to talk about who's leading the playoffs. So that'll be a lot of fun.
Before we move on,
go for it.
Because Klagenfurt were runners-up in that winners round, they've also got a Champions Hockey League spot for next season, the second spot from Austria. So Bolzano we already knew because they won the main league.
Yep.
And then the second pick, the second spot from Austria came to whoever would win the winners stage of the placing round. But because Bolzano won that again, Klagenfurt, who were second place in that placing round, also get a spot in next season's Champions Hockey League. So they are teams 2 and 3 in the Champions Hockey League, behind Frölunda, who of course are the reigning champions.
Yeah, let's be honest, they're going to be in it every single bloody year it runs anyway. So, but yeah, okay, awesome. So that's the Ice Hockey League. We should probably move on to some of these other leagues. We have the Polish Hockey League now. They're into the second round of the playoffs. They're about to begin the second round of the playoffs. So I will summarize each of the first round, the quarterfinal rounds of the playoffs. You had Tichy very easily handling Sanok, the 8th seed, as we kind of expected when we talked about it a fortnight ago. 4-0 sweep, get out the brooms. Interestingly, the 6th seed Krakow managed to beat Torun, the 3rd seed, by 4-2, which I can't remember. I think it was me that said I thought Krakow was going to go through. I just kind of wanted to throw a dark horse pick in there, and they managed to do it, so fair play to them. So that means that the semi-final round, the first semi-final round, is the 1st seed versus the 6th seed, Tichy versus Krakow. Then the other 2 rounds, you had Jastrzębie, the 2nd seed, once again, handling MMKS Podhale, the 7th seed, easily with a 4-0 sweep. And then Katowice taking down Unai Oshvashim, the 4th and 5th seeds, a 4-2 lead. So either the series was ended in a 4-game sweep or a 6-game series, and that means the other semi-final matchup is Jastrzębie versus Katowice. So the only really strange or the only unexpected seed to be in there is Krakow at number 6, because otherwise we'd have the 1, 2, 3, 4 seeds handling it through. Anything you want to add on the Polish League, Chris?
I'll be quite quick. So the top 2 breezed through as we expected. Krakow getting past Torun. Now they took advantage of all their home games. Krakow won all 3 of their home games in that. And after splitting the opening series, the 2 home games at Torun, they split that 1-1. They took advantage of all their home games, won with an aggregate score in their home games of 11 goals to 4 in their aggregate home game. So they did really well, dominating there 5-1 in game 6. It was tight to begin with. It was tied at 1. It was only 2-1 at the end of the second period. And then they turned it on. And it's only when you look into these, really. So they were 3-1 up with just over 2 minutes to go. And then obviously Torren had to throw everything at it. So pulled the netminder. They got 2 empty net goals. So 5-1 in that kind of, to me, doesn't really tell the whole story.
Yeah.
Because it was only 3-1. It was obviously the empty nets that made it look a bit kind of better than it was. The other one, Katowice and EIHL, this really went back and forth. So the first game of the series, EIHL won 8-0. Katowice then came back and won 5-0.
Wow.
EIHL took a 2-1 lead, winning 4-2. And then Katowice came back and it was 2-2. So that series was tied at 2. And then it was a really tight game in game 5, winning by 3-2. In fact, it was in overtime. Overtime didn't take very long. It was only 54 seconds, but there was that overtime. And then again in game 6 as well, back at EIHL, it didn't even need overtime. It needed penalty shots.
Oh, okay. Interesting that they do penalty shots in the playoffs.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I was just thinking that. I have no kind of indication or way of knowing unless I look at a little bit closer to see if anything else went to overtime, so kind of how long the overtime period is. Whether it's just a 5-minute overtime or what. Yashtrabi had one that went to overtime, but that was done in 3.5 minutes, so that doesn't actually answer the question for me at all.
Yeah.
So they went to penalty shots, and it even went to extra penalty shots. So that one was really close for EIHL to get knocked out. Let's just have a look to see if Sherbatov didn't take a penalty shot. The only one that surprised me there was Krakow. As I said, they took advantage of all their home games. In terms of the semi-finals, I can't really see Tichy having too much of a problem getting past Krakow. If I'm honest, what was the points difference overall? They finished 34 points ahead of them.
Wow.
So there was, bear in mind there was like a 10-point difference between Torren and Krakow. This is now a 34-point difference.
Yeah.
So I don't think Tichy are going to have too many problems, but they start on Thursday night, and if they get swept, then they finish next Tuesday. So we should have a good idea of, if it's all going one-sided, we'll have a good idea by the time we record next week.
Indeed, and it'll be very interesting. And I still think that both of us are going to be correct, that the 1 and 2 seeds are going to make it through to the finals, and we'll see how that goes. So it'll be a lot of fun to see how that develops. Now, those are the 3 leagues that have either started the playoffs or are pretty much in the playoff stage. We have one league that has finished their regular season, but have yet to start the playoffs, but their seedings have been confirmed, and that is the Czech Extraliga. So I will take you through the final standings of the regular season, then I'll move over to the playoffs and show you each of the playoff matchups, and then we'll get Chris's thoughts. So we said a couple of weeks ago that it was Trinek's league to lose, and they managed to lose it. Yeah, they managed to lose it. They lost 4 of their last 5 games. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, Sparta Prague won with a game to spare because Trinek went on a bad run, and despite, because what I figured out is that even though Sparta Prague lost their last game, as you can see on the screen, and Trinek won their last game, there was obviously a 5-point gap going into that last game.
Yeah.
So it was the game before then where Sparta beat Kometa Brno 5-0 and Trinek lost to third place Murder Boleslav by 3-4.
Wow.
So that was the moment where Sparta Prague won the league. Boleslav and Liberec kept winning as well, so they get in that first round only by a couple of points in the end. But Pilsen, they tried everything they can since I recorded last week. They won all their games in the run up, but if you're playing catch up and the other teams are winning as well, then there's nothing you can really do about that.
Yeah.
Everything else. Literally everything is as you were from last week. So nobody really moved. When I did my checking earlier.
Yep.
So that was the league. Again, I'll just jump across. Trinek and Sparta Prague, by getting the top 2 spots, they are in the Champions Hockey League for next season. So they are the 4th and 5th teams in the Champions Hockey League, and obviously the only 5 that are confirmed for next season.
I mean, that's what I was going to ask as well, actually, the Champions Hockey League
Yeah.
places, because I wasn't quite sure if there was one or two teams making it, because, they've changed the format recently. So, so Sparta
What I'm
Prague.
finding interesting here is,
What?
and I'm going to jump forward very, very quickly.
Go for it.
On the Champions Hockey League website, it doesn't have the UK qualified team yet.
Well,
now, I was under the impression that they had just deferred Cardiff.
Maybe because they've got the Elite Series, which we're going to talk about soon. Maybe they're going to take the champion from that, potentially.
That's what I was just wondering.
Yeah, that's certainly something we're going to discuss in about 15, 20 minutes' time. Sparta Prague and Trinec have become the 4th and 5th teams, like Chris mentioned, to make the Champions Hockey. I've really missed the Champions Hockey League this year. I'm looking forward to having that back next year.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it, especially because we've been doing this podcast for the last year or so, and it'll be so much more interesting where we can talk about Champions Hockey League stuff.
The Champions Hockey League was like the peg that we put this podcast on.
Yeah, pretty
and then
much.
It just disappeared.
Yeah, but then we've had about a dozen different leagues that we can talk about all year long, and now in next year we can instead focus on the Champions Hockey League in a little bit more detail. So anyway, the final standings, there was 52 games in the regular season in the Czech Extraliga. At the top, like Chris mentioned, HC Sparta Prague, 108 points to take the league. 106 points, Trinec, the 2 Champions Hockey League places. Obviously, noticeably above the rest of the teams in the league. Then Mlada Boleslav with 97 points and Billy Tigry Liberec, 93 points on the season. Now, those 4 teams, as you can see, different colour-coded to the rest of the teams that make the playoffs. Each 4 teams got a first-round bye. So when we go through the playoffs in a moment, you'll see that several of the teams, or those 4 teams, are sat by themselves at the moment. They need to wait for the winners of the first round of the playoffs and their respective series until they get to play them. So bear with us on that bit. Then the normal, the bog standard playoff berths. Pulsen with 91 points, only 2 points back from a first round bye. Mountfield HK with 89 points. Pardubice with 81. Vitkovice with 74. Kometa Brno with 73. Karlovy Vary with 73 also. Litvinov with 72. And then right down in the bottom by a notable margin, Olomouc with 59 points. And then the 2 teams that didn't make the playoffs but aren't being relegated or anything like that. Zlin, 43 points. They ended their season on a win, which is nice. And then Cesc Budějovic, 33 points in their 52 games. Only won 6 games this season. So not the best year for Zlin or Cesc Budějovic, but they're not being relegated to the Czech League 2, so they might have a chance next season to come and do a better job. So let me take you through the playoff berths, and then we can get your thoughts on them, Chris. So I'm just loading them up now. So like I mentioned, top 4 seeds have a first round bye. They don't need to play until the second round, which, I'm not going to complain if I'm them. So I believe that the way Flash Scores have laid it out is that they have the team that's got the first round bye, and then the series below them, whoever wins that series is then going to play the team that's above them, sitting above them in that little bracket, I would imagine, anyway.
I'm yes and no, I think. It might work like that. Again, because I don't know the Czech Extraliga. I don't know. That's what they're assuming. So Sparta Prague would then play the 8th seed, because what they're saying is in the second round, 1st versus 8th, 4th versus 5th, 2nd versus 7th, 3rd versus 6th.
Yeah.
What I don't know, and anyone in the comments or can let us know, is say, for example, Karlovy Vary, the 10th seed, overturn Pardubice, and they are then the lowest ranked side if they then play Sparta Prague, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
If it keeps getting redone as if the first seed always plays the lowest seed left, or if it's a straight bracket. I don't honestly know the answer. I could probably look it up.
That's what I was curious about. Yeah, is it going to be a case of if Kometa Brno beat Vitkovice, do they then become the 8th seed, or do they remain as the 9th seed? And then if a 10th seed goes through, it's very confusing. But regardless, while Chris is looking that up,
I don't know if that's the case or not. Well, I'll see if I can find out.
You take a quick second to try and look that up, and I'll just go through the playoff series. So Sparta Prague, 1st seed, sitting there waiting for their opponent. Vitkovice, the 8th seed, are taking on Kometa Brno in the first round. Liberec, the 4th seed, waiting for their opponent. HC Pulsen, the 5th seed, taking on Olomouc, the 12th seed. Then you have Trinec, the 2nd seed, waiting for their competition. Pardubice, the 7th seed, taking on Karlovy Vary, the 10th seed, I should say. And then Mlada Boleslav, the final team with the first round bye, waiting for Mountfield HK, the 6th seed, to take on Litvinov, the 11th seed. So we won't really know the definitive playoff matchups with all the teams involved until the second round of the playoffs. I don't know when the playoffs begin either for the Czech Extraliga, but I would imagine it's within the next couple of days.
Playoffs begin tomorrow.
Okay.
Also, it's pointing out that this first round is best of 5, not best of 7.
Okay, interesting. So does it become best of 7 for the following 3 rounds?
Yes.
Makes sense.
Okay,
Yep.
so last time, in the 18-19 extra league, because obviously there was no 19-20.
Yep.
The pairings were reseeded after the first and second rounds.
Okay.
So I suspect that that's the same thing again. So should a lower ranked side overturn like the higher ranked side, Sparta Prague would then play them.
Yeah, so if the 12th seed goes through against the 5th seed, the 12th seed won't play Liberec, they'll instead play Sparta Prague.
Yes, so whoever's the lowest ranked side will play Sparta Prague.
Okay.
So if like Litvinov, who are the 11th ranked side, go past Mountfield, they will then play Sparta Prague.
I see. Got you. Okay.
And they'll work it out from that.
Makes sense to me. So that is the Czech Extraliga. Like Chris mentioned, it starts tomorrow when we're recording this. So the first couple of games will have been played by the time this episode goes out on Friday the 12th, I believe is the day it goes out. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Right, so let's move on to the league that only has one more regular season game to play, and the league that I'm repping at the moment on here, and that is the Danish Metalligaen. So, interestingly, has Rungsted secured themselves a place in the Champions Hockey League based on the standings right now? Because I would imagine they're 4.5 points ahead of the Aalborg Pirates on the standings. If there's only one more game to play.
According to the Champions Hockey League website.
Interesting. So maybe they go the playoff champion then.
They may well go the playoff. Let me just have a look.
Go for it. So while you do that, I'll take you through the standings. It's just a question I had. I saw the standings earlier and I was like, hang on a minute, because we were talking about Champions Hockey League places. So the Rungsted Sea Capitals, the team I'm repping here, 100.5 points in 47 games. They're on a 3-game winning streak, one more game to play, so they have the maximum for 103.5 points. The Aalborg Pirates, we already know who's made the playoffs. All of the teams except Odense have made the playoffs. The Aalborg Pirates, 96 points on a 5-game winning streak at least. So they have the chance to finish potentially 1 point back from first place, or 1.5 points back, which will be a real shame to the end of the season. Esbjerg Energy, they were in the 2nd seed, but they've only won one of their last 5 games. They're sitting with 91 points, but they've secured themselves the 3rd seed very comfortably. 4th place, Sondersjijk with 72 points. And then 5th and 6th place, we have Herning Blue Fox and Frederikshavn, both with 71.5 points. Chris and I were talking about this before we started the episode. Herning Blue Fox and Frederikshavn have to play each other in their final game
tonight.
Tonight, yep. So they have to play each other in that game. They've both got the same amount of points. Sondersjijk is only 1 point ahead. Sondersjijk have to play Rungsted, the first seeded team, by a notable margin, have like 30 points ahead of them, 28 points to be exact, 27.5 points to be, if you want to be really exact. So basically 4th, 5th and 6th, it's anybody's guess. It all depends on how the final game of the season goes. They've all made the playoffs, obviously. And then Herlev in 7th with 52.5 points, who have actually played all of their games. They've played all 48 games this season, and they finished with 52.5 points. Then the Redovra Mighty Bulls, they finished with the final seed in the playoffs, 43 points in 47 games. And the Odense Bulldogs, they've got one more game to play. They are currently 5 points back. So if they manage to get the win and the Mighty Bulls lose, who do they play? They play Esbjerg Energy.
They can't make it.
No, obviously they can't make it, but they could finish the season only 2 points back potentially from the playoffs.
Yeah, well, they
got
the overtime win against Redova on a couple of days ago, but they just fell slightly too far back. Yes, the Champions Hockey League spot in Denmark goes to the regular season winners. I'm wondering if, because the season is not officially finished, that's why they've not yet put it on, just in case, I don't know, they get docked points for an illegal player or something like that.
Yeah, so I would imagine that once this final game has been played, most of them are taking place tonight, as far as we're aware. We should see the Champions Hockey League.
They're all tonight.
Yeah, so we should see the Champions Hockey League putting up a tweet at some point being like, congratulations to the Rungsted Sea Capitals for making the Champions Hockey League and winning the regular season, which, as a new fan of the team, I'm very happy about. You know, started my support of the team strong, winning the league. You can't really ask for much more, can you? So that's the Danish Metal League, and we'll obviously talk about the playoffs with them next week. Let's move on to the leagues that haven't quite made the playoffs and just kind of blitz through them quickly. And Chris, you've obviously taken a little look at them, so we can talk about any of the movements that have taken place. So the Swedish Hockey League, let's quickly go through them. We have so it's been 2 weeks since I've looked at this, so there's some interesting things that have come out here. Rögle BK sitting in first place, 91 points, but 47 games played compared to the Växjö Lakers, who are second seed. 45 games played, 87 points. So a couple of wins with the games in hand, and Vaxia sitting back up in first place. We have Skellefteå with 81 points, Luleå with 78, as is Åbro with 78. Frölunda barely holding on to that first round bye with 75 points. 74, only 1 point behind them is Leksands in 7th place. Färjestad with 70 points. Djurgården with 61 points, and the Malmo Redhawks, who have risen up from earlier in the season. Wow, they've gone on a real winning streak here and have managed to secure themselves at this moment in time a place in the playoffs with a couple of games in hand as well. So fair play to the Redhawks. They've really found their form late in the season. And then there's a bit of a gap between the rest of the teams. Linköpings and Oskarshamn are currently sitting in no man's land between the playoffs and between the relegation round. Although Brynäs IF tied with Oskarshamn in points, and HV 71, they've lost 5 straight games. They have picked up a couple of points, but 47 points in 45 games. I can't remember exactly how many games there are in the SHL season, although I'm sure Chris will tell us in a moment. 52. So we've got about half a dozen games left for a lot of these teams.
The season runs to March 25th, so 2.5 weeks left.
Okay, so 2.5 weeks to go. It really is do or die for some of these teams at the moment. We're already starting to see some of the... I think by this time next week, the first, second, maybe even third seeds will have secured themselves a playoff berth, most likely. But we're starting to see that some of these teams will either have to go on a miracle run or their chances of making the playoffs will have passed them. So, Chris, what do you want to say about the Swedish Hockey League? Take it away.
Well, there's not really much to say. Obviously, it's slightly different for you because you weren't here last week.
Yes.
Since I recorded last week, there have only been 4 games across the entire league.
Okay.
And so since I ran through the standings last week, nobody's moved.
Okay, fair enough. So either...
Let's move on.
Yeah, well, pretty much.
That's literally it. Nobody's moved since I did the recording for the podcast last week.
Okay, so nobody's made up any ground and nobody's lost any ground. Although, interesting, Luleå...
Well, there might be a bit of ground making up in terms of points, but not in terms of league positions.
Interestingly, the Åbro might be able to overtake Luleå in the 4th seed because Luleå has lost 5 straight games. Interesting. Just thought I'd mention that. And a team that could really do with some wins. And Frölunda have only won 1 of their last 5. So that's not very good. And based on the way...
I mean, like next week, when there's only like a week to go, we'll be able to look at the run-ins of some of these teams, particularly like those ones that are going on the, do we make the first round or do we get the bye? We'll be able to look at the run-ins. So that'll be interesting.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the Finnish Liga now. I will take you through this, and then obviously Chris will update us. So Lukko sitting in first place, 90 points in 43 games, 4 wins in their last 5 games. However, 3 of them have come in overtime or a shootout, so not the full 3 points for most of their games recently. You've got IFK Helsinki, 82 points on the season in second place. TPS Turku, Kalpa, and the Pelicans, only 2 points separating them. 78, 77, and 76, respectively. All of them winning the majority of their games in the last 5, so that's going to be pretty exciting to see as we get towards the end of the season. You've got the Tapara. Yeah, I thought the Pelicans, but I'd already mentioned them. Tapara with the final first round bye spot, 74 points, although tied with them in points and games played. Karpat in 7th place, 74 points in 42 games. You've then got Eels with 72 points in 43 games. Then there's a bit of a drop. You've got Kuku in 9th place and Vassen Sport with 59 points in 43 games. Asat very close to making the playoffs. They just need to go on a bit of a run, although Sport have 2 games in hand. Asat, 57 points in 45 games. They've got points in 3 of their last 5, but they've lost every single one, so not the best performance from them. Then you've got Hämeenlinna in 12th place, 51 points in 45 games. Saipa, 45 points. JYP Jyväskylä, very surprisingly sitting towards the bottom of the league, 40 points in 44 games, so not even a 500 team. And then Jukurit, 40 points as well, so we might see JYP back at the bottom of these standings by the end of the season, or by the end of the week even. So, Chris, how much longer we got left to go of the Finnish Liga? What are the latest updates?
We've got a while left to run on the Liga because there's a 60-game season, which runs until April the 13th. Since I did the recording and since the last episode went out, Pelicans, they've climbed 2 spots.
Nice.
That's it. That's it. They got 2 wins. They've climbed 2 spots. That's the only movement in the Finnish Liga since last week. Interesting.
And it's also worth mentioning that Kuku have lost 4 of their last 5 games. Asat lost 5 games. Saipa lost 5 games. And Jukurit lost 5 games. So some of the other teams, I mean, Kalpa's on a 4-game winning streak and Lukko have won 4 of their last 5. But there seems to be more teams going on long losing streaks than there are teams going on winning streaks. So maybe that's going to make a big difference in the standings or not.
This is probably the point of the year where like the fatigue starts to sit in a bit.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, yes, okay, so everyone's kind of won and lost, so nobody's really moved so much. But what it has done, I think, from just a cursory glance, is closed it up. There's 6 points, so 2 games, between Turku in third and others in eighth.
Mm.
So, there's 6 teams there that were within a couple of games of each other. So expect to see them move. So it was only a few weeks ago, of course, where I'd written a paragraph on the league because this team up 2, that team down 3, that up 1, down. Whereas this week, it's just a slower week, really.
Absolutely. And, we'll never complain with a slower week considering the amount of teams and leagues that we have to cover on this podcast. And considering we've got playoffs coming up, we're obviously devoting more time to that. So let's move on to the Swiss National League. We've only got a couple more leagues left to look at. Now, this is crazy, the fact that EV Zug have managed to jump out so far ahead of everybody else. So for context, ladies and gentlemen, EV Zug, they've already secured themselves a place in the playoffs. And considering they're already they've over doubled up the 10th seed in points already this season, which is incredible.
Yeah, so they've guguaranteed themselves that quarterfinal spot already. If you remember,
oh wow, they've secured that. Yes. Oh yeah,
secured it. So this is it's a 52 game season in the National League. So Davos can get 27 points. Of course, they're 30 points behind Zug. So Zug have already guaranteed themselves at least a top 6 finish.
Wow. Okay. And for context as well, like Zug, like the first seed and the second seed, there's a 19-point difference. Like we're not talking about first to 10th. We're talking about first to second. Like they've gone on a run. They have been winning. Let's be honest,
Zug are only a couple of games away from securing first seed outright.
No, literally, yeah. They've got 11 games left to play. If they win like 4 or 5 of them, they've secured it.
Not even that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Zug killing the Swiss National League at the moment. And they were one of the teams that had a few games in hand, if I'm not mistaken. 95 points in 41 games. Then you've got Zurich and Fribourg Gotteron that are fighting for that second seed, 76 points each. Geneva Servette and HC Lugano both have 70 points, fighting for that 4th seed. Lausanne are sitting with the final first round bye spot, quarterfinal berth, 68 points in 38 games. So they have games in hand. Geneva Servette have games in hand. So we'll see how they play out as the weeks go on. Then you've got HC Davos that have risen from the ashes this season, 65 points in 43 games. So not quite at the first round bye spot, but they're in a good position to keep themselves in the playoffs. You got BLBN, 62 points in 41 games. Then there is a massive drop compared to the 8th and 9th seed. We're talking 18-point difference. HC Ambry Piotr with the 9th seed, 44 points. The Rapperswil Jona Lakers, 43 points. Then you've got SC Bern, the kind of dark horse here towards the end of the season. They have the most games left to play out of anybody. They have about 15 games left to play, and they're only 4 points back from the playoffs. So it really is like they can make the playoffs, and they might be able to kind of finish with one of the highest seeds in the first round, so 7th, 8th seed perhaps, if they manage to play well enough.
That's a tall order. Bear in mind you've got 13? So Burnham got 15 games left.
Oh, fair point. Sorry, yeah.
They're 23 points off the playoffs, so they need to make up 8 games out of those 15 to get into 8th. So yes, they can make 9th or 10th, but I think 8th's a bit out of reach.
Yeah, fair. My mistake. And then the Langau Tigers, 30 points in 41 games. Chances are their opportunity to make the playoffs has probably passed them, if we're honest. But, they've got 11 games left to play. They're not statistically out of it yet. They could potentially pick up, another 33 points on the season. So if they were able to do that, that would be absolutely incredible. But is it likely? Probably not. Chris,
No.
Anything you want to add on the Swiss National League, Chris?
The only thing to add is Servette and Lugano up a couple of places, Lausanne and Davos down a couple of places since last week.
And I would imagine that's got a part to play in some of the games in hand that have been played. Some of the teams may be catching up on the amount of games.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's played a couple of games this week from what I can just read through. Some have only played one. Some have only played one or not at all, and a couple of others have played 2. So as you said, it's kind of the games in hand, really.
Yeah.
Servette and Lugano winning 2 this week and just jumping themselves up above Lausanne and Davos. That's it, really. As you said, games in hand.
Yeah, and obviously we're getting to the point where they're having to find time to make up those games in hand. And so
these games in hand, now we're in mid-March, which is insane in itself.
Yes.
All these games in hand, like earlier on in the season, there were like 10 game disparities, weren't there? Whereas these are all now being made up. So it's getting closer to, obviously what the leagues want to do is get the games in hand out the way while there's still 3 or 4 games to play, so that some teams haven't finished and other teams have got like 3 games to play. They want like those last few games to be really exciting. So
yes. Absolutely. And I think they're going to be pretty exciting as we go along. So we've still got a little while to go before the Swiss National League is done. But the good thing is what we're going to find is when some of the league's playoffs are done and we can essentially stop talking about them and kind of round up their seasons, we'll have other teams that are either really early on or just entering the playoffs. So we're going to have a constant stream of stuff to talk about, which is going to be fun.
It's one thing that's actually made the whole pandemic and everything work in our favour is the fact that it's staggered all the starts.
Yes, and
given
also,
us...
yeah, I mean, because obviously they're staggered somewhat during a normal season, but
but not as much as this.
Yes, like you mentioned, because obviously we've had the Finnish Liga stopping for 2 weeks, and we've had all of this other stuff taking place. So yeah, it's been quite fun. You know what? I'm really enjoying looking back at Europe this week. It's been 2 weeks since I've done it. It's like, you know what? I'm having a good time because the playoffs have started. We can kind of delve deeper into a few other topics as well. This is good fun, Chris. Then we have the DL. Let's talk about the DL, which there's been some pretty notable
exciting
moves.
News in the DEL.
Yes, there's been some pretty notable moves as far as I'm aware in terms of the standings. Do you want to say the news, Chris?
Since you've last done
Yes, go for it.
Since you've last been here, yeah. So in terms of movements since last week's episode, there's been none.
Okay.
No movements at all since I recorded last week. Obviously, it's 2 weeks for you.
Yes.
News is that they have scheduled the North versus South fixtures.
Oh.
So the season is not finishing at the end of this stage. There is plenty more DEL action to come.
I am so happy for the German DEL that we've finally got some good news in the hockey world, Chris. Isn't that great? Like we've had the Elite League do their draft yesterday. We've got the German DEL have figured things out between North and South. It really does feel like we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel at this point, isn't it? And you know what? I'm all for it. I'm all for it.
They have scheduled the North versus South fixtures. It is one home, one away against the team in the other conference. So they're still playing up to, everyone plays 24 games before they start doing the North and South. And then it's an additional 14 games on that. So it'll be a 38 game season.
Okay.
And that will run until the 18th of April. So it will be the latest league. Obviously excluding this Elite mini series, but we'll gloss over that. Because obviously they started so late. So the 18th of April, the DEL roughly, I mean, that was just Berlin's I looked at. There might be, a day later or something, but mid-April was when the DEL was going to finish. But yeah, in terms of actually what's going on, nobody's moved since last week's episode, apart from the fact there have been a couple of games. Sorry, despite the fact there's been a couple of games, there have been no movements in the DL since last week, but they're essentially extending their season and they've scheduled in these other 14 games.
Which is fantastic news, and I'm so glad to hear it. So I'll just quickly take you through the standings. So there hasn't been a huge movement. There has for me, obviously, but we'll brush past that. So the Berlin Ice Bears, currently sitting first place in the North Division, 46 points in 22 games. 9 points behind Bremerhaven in second place. We have the Wolfsburg Grizzlies in third place with 35 points, and then Dusseldorf EG with 31 points in 21 games. However, the Eislowen Roosters, 31 points also, so they're not that far behind. You have the Cologne Sharks with 27 points, then the Crayfield Penguin, 15 points in 22 games. Yes, boys. Then in the South Division, you have Adler Mannheim, 52 points. So we very much have our two front runners. Adler Mannheim has been wiping the floor with the competition. And then you've got Red Bull Munich, 43 points. So interestingly, Red Bull Munich would be the third seeded team by a decent margin if they were playing in the North Division. So that's maybe something to keep an eye on. Maybe the South Division, there's a bit more of a disparity between top and bottom. Then you've got Ingolstadt with 39 points in 22 games. You've got the Schweiniger Wild Wings with 30 points in 22. Only 5 points back, the Augsburg Panthers with 25 points in 21 games. Interestingly, they have the Straubing Tigers with 27 points, slightly lower than the Augsburg Panthers. However, they have played 2 more games in hand, so maybe that has something to do with it. I'm not 100% sure. And then the Nuremberg Ice Tigers, 15 points in 21 games. I want to see a game between the Crayfield Penguin and the Nuremberg Ice Tigers. The battle to see who the worst team of the DEL is. Let's get this going. I want to know.
Okay, hang on. Crayfield against Nuremberg is on... let me have a look. Nuremberg. The 6th of April and the 9th of April.
Oh, I love it. Let's do it.
I should point out, so this north-south section finishes on the 15th, which is Sunday. So by the time we record next week, that section will be done.
Perfect.
I'm just going to have a look at the DL League to see if I can figure out why that's the case or if that is just a mistake on flash scores. So that's the DL. There's not really a great amount in terms of the in terms of the change. So
yeah, it's just nice to be back talking about some of the European leagues.
Oh yeah, I remember why. And again, we have discussed this before. They've done their table on points per game. I think in case everything gets cancelled.
Right.
So Augsburg Panther, yes, they've only got 25 points, but because they've only played 21 games,
that's what I thought.
They've got 1.19 points per game, whereas Straubing have got 1.174 points per game. That's why.
Got it. Yeah. So they're doing it based on points per game. That makes complete sense now. We understand that. So just want to quickly remind you about the Norwegian Fjordkraft Ligaen. They have not played it. Yep. They haven't played a game since January, pretty much, which is not great.
Yeah.
But they are scheduled supposedly to start next week. Supposedly.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, but we've said that for the last 3 weeks.
Yes, but
there's supposed to be games today that have been postponed.
Yeah, I'm just we've got to stay optimistic here, Chris. I know. So hopefully they get something going in the next couple of weeks, but we'll have to wait and see. Like Chris mentions, yeah, they've promised this several times before. Hopefully they figure it out. And last, but by no means least, the French League Magnus, which is getting quite close to the end of its season. And oh my word, Nice has collapsed, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah,
I will take you through the standings quickly, and then Chris, if you want to update us with everything, because I don't know. Have they made a decision on Nice yet?
No.
Oh my god. Anyway, first team, Rouen, 43 points, 15 games. 3 games in hand over second place Angers, and they're already 5 points up, so they're looking pretty good. Speaking of Angers, 38 points in 18 games, although they're on a 5-game winning streak, so they're giving it a good shot, Third place, you have Grenoble with 31 points in 17 games. Then fourth, you have Gap with 27. Nice with 26, having lost at least 5 straight. So that's not good. Bordeaux and Mulhouse also have 26 points on the season, but different amounts of games played. Sergi Pontoise currently taking the final playoff berth with 24 points in 17 games. Then you have Amiens with 21, Chamillon-Mont-Blanc with 21 also, Anglet with 19 points, and Briançon with 13 points. Chris, what are your thoughts on the French League Magnus?
Okay, so Gap up 3, Mulhouse down 2, Bordeaux up 2, Sergi Pontoise up 2, and Amiens down 2. Now, Nice.
Yes.
When the league decide what they want to do, if the games are null and void, they will now go from 5th to 11th.
Oh, wow. No.
They will go from their 26 points down to 18 points and drop into 11th spot.
Oh.
So bearing in mind that it was only, a month or so ago they were in second. They've just plummeted down to 5th and now gone all the way down to 11th. I don't know. I'll have to have a brief look. I'll have a quick look at last year's league. Just see, are they supposed to be up at the top, or are they a team where it was kind of lying a bit about how far up they were?
Just a question.
Because that'll be an interesting one. Yes.
Yeah, so the only question I have is so Nice, the how many games are they looking to deduct or change?
They would lose 4 games and it totaled 8 points.
Okay, so if they lose again, because the standings on Flash Scores has those 4 games and those 4 results having been played, doesn't it? So they would drop to 18 points, but they would only have played 15 games. So they would have a few games in hand.
Correct.
So the playoffs isn't outside the realm of possibility still for Nice, if that's the way they decide to take it.
I'm looking at Nice over the last few seasons. Last season, so the 1920 season, they finished 10th out of 11.
Right.
So they kind of should. Then they finished 7 out of 12, 9 out of 12, 11 out of 12 in the last few years. So they're not a team that. And then they weren't in the league in 15-16. They must have got promoted from the league below. So they're not. They're not Champions Hockey League, should be winning the league every year. So if they do lose those points and they are down in kind of 9th, 10th, 11th, that is kind of what we'd expect from them over the last few years. But still, it's kind of, it must really hurt.
Yes, because they're so close yet so far is kind of the phrase that I can think of. That's a look at the final league in Europe that we need to discuss. There is one more league that we're going to talk about in more detail. There's no there's no quiz this week because I think Chris said it was National Barbie Day, and that's not really that hockey related.
It was. I kind of had two. There were two things really. It was National Barbie Day and National Get Over It Day.
Maybe that's what.
And I
Nice
wasn't really
needs.
sure how to make a quiz around Get Over It.
Yeah, maybe that's what Nice needs. They just need to get over it.
So
You know?
yeah, it was kind of.
So yeah. So what we're actually going to talk about instead is some news that obviously Chris alluded to last week on the podcast. And that's the news that hockey in the UK. We've had some hockey in the UK so far. We've had it in the EIHL. The Nottingham Lions have obviously come back and Chris has been able to do some commentary. But our top tier Elite League, we're actually getting some hockey with our Elite League teams. Well, 4 of the Elite League teams.
We are.
So as I imagine Chris mentioned last week, there's 4 teams taking part in the 2021 Elite Series of the EIHL, the Elite Ice Hockey League, which is the Coventry Blaze, the Manchester Storm, the Nottingham Panthers, and the Sheffield Steelers. And I don't know how much you talked about it last week, Chris, but to summarise it, this is essentially a chance for the GB players to, one, get ice time and kind of get paid to play the sport, or make some money from it now that things are starting to open up and we're getting more of an opportunity to put on the sports and put on events and everything like that. There's no fans in attendance for this event, but they've obviously managed to secure the funding somehow, which didn't require a loan from the government. And the other reason this is being done is because it gives our Great Britain international players, our national team, Team GB, the chance to get some ice time, get the chance to play some actual meaningful competitive games before the tournament takes place. Because otherwise, as we've mentioned this season, we would have been at a huge disadvantage because up to half of our roster may not have played a single game of pro hockey this season. So the biggest news that came from all of this, it was obviously announced recently. Chris went into details about that. But the draft took place. Now, this is a very unique season for the Elite League, and it's a unique event that the Elite League had. And you know what? I'd love to see them include this in other seasons. I love this whole draft idea. Maybe it's just me because I'm an NHL fan and I love the draft and expansion draft, and it's always like it's kind of like got that fantasy team aspect to it. And then obviously it might be difficult during a normal regular season to be able to do this. I don't think some players would enjoy moving from team to team every single year and not really having any power over where they choose to play. That said, they did a draft. If you want to know like the complete details about the draft, either check out last week's episode because Chris went into detail on it, or check out my live stream on my own YouTube channel at Oddman Rush, because I did a live stream and explained all the rules, went into a lot of detail, talked about the protected lists and all this stuff. Essentially, we're going to talk about some of the picks that were made and discuss our responses on how we think each team is going to look based on this. So do you want to take it pick by pick and kind of give our thoughts about this, Chris? Would that be the smartest thing to do?
For the early rounds,
yes,
I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
The thing that surprised me, obviously, the draft went out on Facebook last night, 7:00, but it had been pre-recorded because, I mean, you could tell it could because they already had all the graphics ready.
Yes, and there was light streaming into some of their
and there was
rooms
light streaming in despite the fact it was dark, yes. So the thing that struck me is we knew ahead of time that there was a trade proposal for first-round picks.
Yes.
Now, I don't know about you, but I had assumed that it was Coventry or Sheffield trying to get 1 or 2.
You would have thought so, yes.
What then took me by complete surprise was that it was a trade between Panthers and Storm for 1 and 2.
Yes.
That completely surprised me. And then what also surprised me off the back of that was that having known that the Panthers were protecting Jackson Whistle, who had been with them last season, they then picked Ben, the netminder. They then picked Ben Bounds, which to me, I was not expecting that because I was expecting them to play Jackson Whistle because they protected him. What I think puts Panthers in a really strong position now, and it's something that has been mentioned before on a couple of our podcasts and people I've been talking to, because they're playing the British netminders and they will, they've probably got the strongest British netminding pair.
Yes.
There in Bounds and Whistle.
For sure.
They can have 8 import skaters rather than having to use an import on the netminder, which is obviously going to be a big difference to that. The other thing that I will discuss, and obviously I'll chat about it with you as well, is that, like, if you check out, like, Manchester have come out and they've said, okay, they've got Sam Gospel and Stephen Murphy, and they've said today Stephen Murphy will play as the backup.
Interesting.
Which means they've got to get an import netminder in.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what I saw. The other thing is that these teams, particularly in terms of Brits, they're stacked.
And I love it.
These are some stacked teams. And naturally, of course, because you've got
only 4 teams.
You've got all the best British players.
Yeah.
Rather than in 10 teams, they're in 4 teams. So you've got 2.5 times the brilliant British players in those 4 teams. Like even Sheffield, they've got Ben Churchfield and Curtis Warburton as their son. Now, Curtis Warburton is a really promising young netminder. I almost saw him the other week, but then Sheffield Scimitars didn't play him against the Lions.
And it's also worth mentioning that it's also worth mentioning that he's been placed on Sheffield's taxi squad for the tournament. He's being used as the third string, so we're expecting them to go and get an import netminder also. Carry on.
Yeah, Ben Churchfield, again, he's been over in NCAA 3 for the last few years over in America.
Yep.
But hasn't played in the Elite League, but he has been doing really well over in America and was at Sheffield in the junior system.
Mm.
And then in Coventry, you've got the netminders of Jordan Headley and Will Bray. Will Bray's only a 17-year-old, so again, he's going to be in the taxi squad. Jordan Headley has been obviously with the Coventry Blaze before. Not a bad netminder, just shy of 900, 3.2 goals against average. So I don't think, if you look at netminders, I don't think there can be any doubt Panthers have got the strongest netminding.
Yeah, this is something
in this series.
This is something I wanted to mention actually, because it's not just the case of, oh, okay, the Panthers have 2 British netminders. It means they can use all 8 import slots on forwards and defensemen from overseas and kind of get some higher quality potentially guys or more experienced guys in those positions. It's not only that, it's also the fact that they don't just have 2 British netminders. They have one of the best netminders in Ben Bounds in the league. Like, we're talking compared to import netminders as well. So it's not as if they've sacrificed having 2 kind of middle of the road British netminders to get 8 imports in front of them. They've actually got a goaltender that is year in, year out, also former guest of this podcast.
Yes.
We're not just saying this because he's the former guest of the podcast. Like, he is legit. He's our international netminder. Like, he's the best goaltender in the country, hands down by far, if you ask me. So the fact that go for it.
I was going to say the other thing. Well, finish your point about netminders. So I was going to move away from.
Yeah, it's just really good from Nottingham's perspective because, like I mentioned in my stream when I recorded it when I was streaming yesterday, as the draft was happening, they've got 2 very competent players between the pipes, and obviously, what I mentioned in my stream is they might have sacrificed managing to pick up, I don't know, or managing to keep a high-scoring guy, especially because Robert Farmer isn't taking part in the tournament as far as we're aware. Mm-hmm. So they've lost him, and he's been a pretty clutch guy for the Panthers in years past. Rob Lakovic was obviously a high scorer back in his day, but he's more developed into a bottom 6 penalty killer, kind of Swiss Army knife kind of play. He can score goals, there's no doubt about it, but he's not known for that as much nowadays. So they didn't really have a guy in their protected list that was like, except for Brett Pelini. Brett Pelini was kind of the standout one for them, and it was kind of, in my opinion, it was like, oh, okay, they may be putting a little bit too much responsibility on Brett Pelini to be the kind of go-to guy. Obviously, they have 8 imports they can bring in, and that's obviously going to help balance the lineup and hopefully balance the goal scoring. But to summarize each of the teams and kind of their decisions, if you ask me, I think the Panthers, depending on, this is my thoughts without the imports coming in, because obviously that's going to change things up completely. But if I go with the Nottingham Panthers, the way that they drafted and the way that they protected, I very much think they're going to be a team that tries to win 2-1, 1-0 games. They're going to be the kind of team that, whether it's their defensemen or their goaltending, they have those veteran presences there that they can shut down the other teams when they want to. I very much feel like they'll try and take a 1-0 lead, 2-0 lead, and then just basically play keep away for the rest of the game. The Sheffield Steelers, with the guys they kept, they have a solid set of protected players on their list. Obviously, we can go into discussions about Liam Kirk being protected by the Steelers, although that was legit. It was like, it's within the rules. They were allowed to do that. We can talk about that in a moment if you'd like, Chris. But the fact that they've got Jonathan Phillips, Robert Dowd, and Liam Kirk all protected. They are either clutch goal scorers or solid goal scorers. They didn't obviously protect a netminder. They keep, obviously, Davy Phillips, and then Brendan Connolly, obviously a solid high-scoring guy for them also. So I feel like they're going to be the guns-blazing team. They're going to kind of remind me of like the 80s Oilers. They just have to score more goals than the opponent. Doesn't matter how many the opponent lets in. They just need to score one more. Then I feel like with both Manchester and Coventry, obviously they're kind of the smaller teams compared to Nottingham and Sheffield in terms of their overall reach and kind of their success in the last few seasons. What I will give credit to them for is they have picked a lot of younger guys that have kind of been on the cusp of making the Sheffields, the Cardiffs, the Nottinghams over the last couple of years. They've been really close to making that jump, or they've been playing third, fourth line time, kind of getting limited minutes. I think they both made some really good decisions in getting some of these younger guys, kind of 23, 24, 25, just before their prime years, and going, okay, we might actually give you guys a chance if you play well enough to jump up into our top six and be a key player for us. So it's kind of like high risk, potentially high reward picks that they chose. Like, for example, some of the guys, I'm just looking down this list, Cole Shudra going to Coventry. He's never been like a go-to guy, but he got drafted 11th overall in this draft, so maybe they're going to be like, right, you've got a chance to kind of prove yourself. Coventry also picking up Sam Duggan. You've got Manchester picking up... who's the guys that Manchester picked up? There's a few of them that I noticed. They managed to pick up a couple of younger guys later on in the draft, you know? So Tom's Rootkis as well going to Coventry. So I feel like that's Coventry's like MO here, you know? It's like we're going to give these younger players a chance to, you know, become go-to guys for us. And I really like, I'm really excited for this season, actually. Like, I'm a lot more excited than I expected to be, and I was quite excited for it to begin with. Like, before I was like, oh, I'll try and catch a game when I can, but now I'm like, provided it's not super expensive to watch these games, because I'm not paying for every single game. That's ridiculous. If they're charging for every single webcast, then they're missing a trick here. They should definitely do a season pass or something like that. That would make the most sense. But then again, you know, the Elite League, sometimes they're not known for having the most sense in the world, in my opinion anyway. And yeah, they have some solid players taking part, and I think I speak for both myself and Chris when I think we're both really excited for this. Anything else you want to add, Chris?
Yeah, so there's one thing that I think the Panthers are... You could kind of work it out. So with the imports being, 14 last year, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
You only had to have like 8 Brits on your roster.
Yeah.
Now, when it became clear that, like, when the Panthers came out and said, well, we've discovered we can't protect Joe Hazeldine. So then you're down to like 6 Brits, and they're protecting 5 of them. You're like, well, it's pretty much a certainty with these Brits, like, unless they pulled something out of the bag from, you know, players who weren't there last year, but they would have signed for the next year, which is obviously the Kirk situation.
Yes.
To me, Panthers seem to be going for a defense-first mentality. Yes, and I'll explain my thinking behind that. Firstly, obviously, as we have discussed, they've gone for the best net minding.
Yep.
But also, they have decided out of the 3, I'll have to get Elite Prospects off my laptop, because apparently on my Mac, I have exceeded the amount of page views that I'm allowed, which for some reason only ever happens on my Mac. I don't understand it, but it only happens on my Mac. Panthers have gone with you. They've got the best net minding, and they've only taken 3 defensemen.
Yes.
In this... in the draft. Now, the flip side to that as well, I've got Sheffield up now. Okay, so Sheffield have got 3 as well, but one of the defensemen from the Panthers, Liam Stenton, who was on a 2-way with the Clan last season, is just going to be in the taxi squad.
Yes.
Now, I'll close that down because it seems to be to the internet a bit. So they seem to, what my view is here is that they've got the best net minding, then they're going to fill the defense with the imports and try and just keep everything out the net. And as you said, win by a few goals rather than trying to put 5-6 past. They're going to win smaller.
Yes.
And
Sheffield's kind of the opposite.
That's my thinking. Sheffield. What Sheffield have done is just completely stacked the forwards full of goal scorers.
I love it. And then it's great.
they've still got imports to fill in the defence. So I think
yes,
on the face of it, it looks as though Sheffield might be the strongest. Obviously, it completely depends on how these teams go. I think I like what you said. Kind of there with Manchester, they've got Jakub Luktrich, he's 19, Finn Jurik's 21, Hazelden's 20, Ben Solder's 20 as well, Coventry as well, Mac Howlett 21, Austin Mitchell-King 19, Sam Russell 20, obviously Will Bray, the 17-year-old netminder, whereas the Panthers and I think the Steelers as well have gone, on the whole, slightly older.
Yes.
And for the experience, I think they have particularly gone for trying to get the Brits. I mean, I realize you've got Bounds, Whistle, Betteridge. There's so many team players that are in the GB squad and on the long list. And of course, that's the same with all the teams. But
yes,
I think what we've got to remember is the overriding thing with this, which is the results. Because I'm pretty sure that they can't award the winner of this the Champions Hockey League place. And I think there would be uproar within the other 6 teams if that was to be the case. I think they've got to defer Cardiff. That's in my view anyway. They've got to defer Cardiff, put Cardiff in it again.
Yeah.
Because it's not a proper Elite League season.
Yes.
So you've got to remember that with this, the results don't matter. The only thing with this series that really matters is getting Great Britain's national squad ice time, match time, get them ready for the World Championships. That's the number one priority in this. Yes, it's going to be a great spectacle. This draft, I'd love if they found some sort of way to bring something into the season as a regular.
Do you know what would be really cool? Do you know what would be really cool? I don't think they'd be able to do this, but if they did like an import draft, I think that would be really cool. If there was, obviously the import players that are coming over, they might want to sign with Sheffield. They don't want to end up in, I don't know, Dundee or something like that. Because, it's like completely, like the complete opposite direction of where they want to go. But, like how some of the major junior leagues, like the Quebec Major Junior League has an import draft. The OHL has an import draft. That's how Kirky went to Peterborough, like things like that. I know it's probably not going to happen, but I feel like that would be a really good idea.
I think the thing with that is that would only happen if you had like a salary cap, because obviously some import players will expect a certain salary.
That's true.
Like Fife or Dundee wouldn't be able to pay him, but Nottingham could, which is the issue with that.
Obviously, it's in an ideal world,
Yeah, in an ideal world, but I'm looking forward to it. There's obviously some information that we've got to discover.
Yes.
Fixtures. We need to know who the imports are as well.
Yes, very true.
Because that's all these teams. We go, okay, well, this is a great base for the team, but who are these imports? Like, have the Panthers managed to bring back for next season? A Sam Hare, and players like that.
Like a Luke Pither
have Manchester been able to do the same? Yeah, have Manchester been able to do the same? Have Sheffield been able to do the same? So that's going to be really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Indeed. So essentially, like Chris mentioned, it's to get GB players actual game experience. We're not talking about like scrimmages with their own team, because players don't go 100% during a scrimmage, because you don't want to injure the other players or have the chance to injure your own teammates. It's to give them actual game time, actual legitimate games. That's the most important thing. And then the second thing from a fan perspective is bragging rights. Come on, like whoever wins this tournament, like if you see a Nottingham-Manchester final or a Sheffield-Nottingham final, like bragging rights are going to be really, really important in this. And I feel like the Elite League has a really good opportunity to do a lot of fan engagement with stuff like this.
One other thing, what they're doing, which I love, and I wish they would do this every single year, they're doing that best of 3 final.
Yes, I like that.
And that would be brilliant if they could do that every year.
Yes.
Like maybe extend if you could find like a bank holiday weekend in April. I can't remember when the April bank holiday is, and make playoff weekend there. So you do like Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and you do the semi-finals on the Saturday, and then you can't do best of 3 because you'd play 2 games in one day. But you know what I mean? Like if we can find some way of doing like a best of 3 final or something in every year, that I would really love as well.
You know what I think would be a really good move for the Elite League to do? They're not going to do this, but what I think would be a really good move for them is if they streamed all the games on Twitch. and had like a way of getting the fans involved. Because, for example, because they'll have a live chat going with the whole thing. Because, the webcasts don't have live chats available in the Elite League at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
They could obviously have all the fans in the live chat. They could, it would be really awesome if they had the Twitch chat be able to, like, influence the music that's played during each stoppage of play. Or they could have, like, a set playlist or something, and then you choose, like, a number, and then it picks that song. You could have, like... I feel like the best thing to do here, because it's not, like you say, it's not a legitimate EIHL season. So, like, have as much fun with it as possible would be my argument.
Yeah,
but they're not going to do that because they want to make money from the webcasts. But,
That's the thing. They've got to make the money from the webcast. And, of course, they've done this deal with Sports England. The exact figure has not been released. The exact nature of the loan stroke grant stroke whatever it is has also not been released.
Yeah.
So we don't know how much money they've got to be able to pay back from this as well. From what I understand, I think the argument was made about the national side for the World Championships. And that was quite a significant part of it. But no, I think it'll be really good. It'll be good fun to watch. For anybody who is interested, obviously, once we know details, we'll let you know on the podcast.
Of course.
And the other thing as well is that they are doing Facing the Crowd.
Yes.
Which I quite like the idea.
It's too expensive.
£25.
It's too expensive. It's too expensive.
That as well.
Yeah. I love the idea, but too expensive.
I think the look of it will be good because what they're doing is you can pick your team.
Yeah.
So what you do is you take your picture and then it gives you like a gold for Panthers or orange for Sheffield glow around you. Now, and again, I don't know this, but I suspect that because unless you pay extra to be in a prime position, which I think will be the gold seating in the middle.
Yeah.
I think it's all the same. So what they might do, or what I would do if it was me, is group the sets of fans together.
That would be a perfect idea.
So you have like a gold block, orange block. Yeah. I don't know what they're going to do, but that would make sense to me. So
part of me wants to get one and just stick your face on it, Chris.
If you want to pay for it and put my face on it, that's absolutely
but
fine.
I want it to be shown on like I want to get like a really embarrassing picture of you and put it on like the gold, like the prime seating, like right behind the coach's bench. But I'm not going to pay like £100 to do that.
They did a similar thing in football, and what I didn't understand was people that would like take a photograph of their dog, and then their dog would just be in the middle of the football scene. It's like, what are you getting out of that?
Yeah, they get to see their dog on the TV, and they can go to their dog like, look, it's you on the TV, and the dog's like panting, like, I don't know what's going on, but you're happy, so great. The only other thing I will clarify before we finish up, because we have been going for about 90 minutes now. Let's just clarify the Liam Kirk situation for those of you who are unaware of why it's happened. So, for those of you who don't know, Liam Kirk, former 7th round pick by the Arizona Coyotes back in 2018, kind of seen as the best and brightest British prospect. He's 21 now, I believe. So he's still young. Mm-hmm. He's still got a ton of potential around him. There's talk about him maybe actually making it into the Arizona Coyotes organization, maybe the AHL squad in the future. He was supposed to play with the Peterborough Petes of the OHL this year. However, the OHL season obviously hasn't materialized yet. And he then instead decided to go play in the Hockey Etten, I believe it is, the third tier of
Sweden.
Yes.
Yep,
the third tier with Hanals. And he played quite well there, all things considered. Like, he had a pretty good run with the team. Then after a while, decided to come back, join the Sheffield Steel Dogs. Now, there's a lot of commotion. Everybody thought he was going to be either the first or second pick in this draft behind Boundsy or in front of Boundsy. It was going to be Kirky or Bounds were the kind of two guys.
That was going to be it, yes.
However... about an hour before the draft was announced, as the EIHL social media was releasing their protected lists, Liam Kirk was mentioned on the Sheffield Steelers protected list. Now, obviously, a lot of fans from the other teams were like, well, damn it, we wanted Liam Kirk. That really sucks, because he's
essentially, yes.
Yeah, because he's the best and brightest forward in UK hockey at the moment. So if this might be the only chance we ever have to see him in our team's jersey, so let's pick him up. However... a lot of people are like, well, how did they manage to do this? This isn't fair. He was supposed to be playing in Peterborough. He played in Sweden this year. Like, how does this work? Now, it's important to remember the 3 criteria that allowed teams to protect one of their 5 players. They either had to play for the team that was protecting them during the 2019-20 Elite League season. Kirky didn't do that. He was over in North America playing for the Petes. They had to have been contracted to play for the team during the 2020/21 season that never happened. Kirky doesn't fall under that one either, because he was supposed to be playing in Peterborough in the Ontario Hockey League. Or they were supposed to be signed, or they're supposed to be signed to the team that protected them for the following or / upcoming 2021/2022 EIHL season. Now, this is the one that Kirky falls in, because according to the head coach of the Steelers, Aaron Fox, who actually helped facilitate Kirky's move to Hanau's in the Hockeyetton earlier this year, which I read in the interview he gave with the Sheffield Steelers, which I found quite interesting. He mentioned how Kirky has signed a contract with the Sheffield Steelers before the draft took place and everything like that. He signed a contract with the Steelers for the 21-22 season, essentially as insurance, because the expectation is that he's going to be going back over to North America or finding employment elsewhere in Europe for the upcoming season. He's not eligible to play in the OHL for the next season because he'll be 21 years old, and obviously the cutoff point is at 20 years old. There might be the chance for him to join the Tucson Roadrunners of the AHL if the Coyotes want to have him there. He might even get onto the NHL roster if they're impressed with him enough. Whether that's obviously a long shot, but it's still a potential likelihood, given that he was drafted by the team. I believe this might be his last year of eligibility to sign an entry-level contract, and he might become a UFA for the following 22-23 season. Not 100% sure on that, don't quote me on that, but that sounds right based on how the contracts work and everything. So this might be his last legit chance to kind of work his way into the Arizona Coyotes organization. So basically, the Steelers signed him that if he doesn't receive any other offers, either from North America or from a higher tier league in Europe, he can come play and return to Sheffield and play for the Sheffield Steelers for next season. And it gave them the chance to protect him so he can play for them this season. Now, I'm not really that surprised. I think, yeah, it kind of sucks for the other teams, but the rule was there. Like, the rule was fair for all the other teams. Like, that it was their prerogative to do so. And also, like, can we really imagine Liam Kirk in another jersey other than the Steelers? Like, he's played pretty much his entire junior and pro career before being drafted with the Sheffield Steelers. Like, obviously, Bouncy being in a Nottingham uniform is going to look kind of weird, but Cardiff aren't taking part, whereas Sheffield are, and that's where Kirky's been playing for most of his career. He's a Sheffield guy, you know, like, this is kind of, you can't really see it any other way, but I just wanted to clarify that. So essentially, he signed a contract with them as insurance for next year, gave Sheffield the chance to protect him. Chris, do you want to add anything on that? Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what he's done is sign a contract with a release clause.
Yes.
Essentially.
Which a lot of players do. You know, that is quite common.
He's signed a contract that says, I'll play for you, but I want this release clause in, which obviously Sheffield are more than happy to facilitate because, as they said, they're not going to stop him trying to get into the NHL because what a story that would be.
Yes.
So it completely makes sense. I think a lot of I won't say aggravation, but I think a lot of the kind of commotion on social media was because people weren't expecting it.
Yes.
They were expecting I think a lot of that obviously might also be down to people not entirely understanding how the OHL works, the eligibility, or the rest of it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of it which was more, they were expecting him to be in the draft, go to Manchester or Nottingham 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And then obviously when it comes out, everyone's like, oh, yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Boo!
And of course, with him not really playing this year, like he went to Sweden for a bit and now he's playing in like second tier British.
Yeah.
Like, yes, okay, obviously we'd love to see him, but his final year, it's not really, obviously it's not his fault, but it's not really been utilised very well.
No.
And he might not have done particularly well to impress over in North America. So I think having the option of coming back here, because of course he could be left just with nothing at all, makes sense. And I think while he is already here, going to an organisation and getting more GB practice time makes complete sense. And signing this contract, which gives him the option, if there isn't the North America alternative to play in the Elite League, play regular hockey. Let's be honest, I think Liam Kirk, he's not going to like tail off. I think he's going to be a GB national player for his career.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
So obviously he wants to keep playing hockey. If he has to play it here, he plays it here. So there's plenty to talk there. And I think a lot of it came from the shock rather than from it. Like the more you dive into it, they go, and the more you think about it, they go, yeah, okay, so he signed a contract. Essentially, if you boil down to it, he signed a contract with a release clause. That's what he did.
Yep.
People are like, oh, it's very backdoor and all the rest of it. But I mean, you look at it and you think, I think because there was always the opportunity for some surprises to come in here, because there was the clause of you can protect him if they're signed for next season.
Yeah.
If it had only been players protected that had already been played, then obviously there wouldn't be any of these surprises. But it was, if they were signed for next season, so all these teams could have had anybody's signature lined up that they just didn't tell people.
Yeah, of course.
Could be anybody.
I mean, the Steelers pretty much had their entire roster signed for this season, but then obviously the season didn't take place, so they released a load of their players to go and play overseas. So, like, the fact that they might have a guy like Kirky signed at some point doesn't surprise me in the slightest, especially once the OHL season was kind of scrapped, for want of a better term.
It's no different, really, to, for example, Nottingham signing Ben Bounds for next season.
Yeah.
Nobody knowing about it, and then him appearing on their protected list.
I guess
it's no different. It's no different to that, really.
I guess the only difference is last year, Boundsy was playing for Cardiff, and he wasn't overseas.
But I know that's not an example of the time.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
it's no real difference to that.
A high-profile player that has recently played overseas, turning up with a different team, or turning up or not being eligible for it because of XYZ. So it's going to be interesting. You know what? I mean, if Bounds has a good time with Nottingham and he doesn't get any offers elsewhere, maybe we'll see him in a Panthers uniform for the 2021-22 season.
Maybe. So,
although I'd love to see him elsewhere in Europe. Like, he deserves a shot to keep playing in the Ice Hockey League or somewhere higher up. I really hope, and this is with the most kindness in the world to these players, I really hope our best players aren't playing in GB next season. I want them to be playing in higher leagues and kind of helping refine their own games and kind of increase the exposure of UK hockey. Like, that's the goal at the end of the day. We want our first player in the KHL. We want stuff like that to happen. And in order to do that, we need our players to go and, make their mark on the international stage and across Europe. But regardless, I feel like this is a really good place to end today's episode, Chris. We got something else to do. What else we got to do?
We were going to go back.
Yes,
and
sorry,
see if
go
any
for
brooms were getting out.
Yeah, I've just put up the normal overlay, so go for it. Yeah.
That's fine. We haven't quite finished, but I'm going to call it.
Okay.
So there is a broom in Moscow. CSK Moscow beating Spartak Moscow by 3-1. So they sweep the series 4-0.
Nice.
Also, literally just this second, also finished a broom in Jokerit. Lokomotiv Yaroslavl have won by 4-1. Jokerit gets swept out in the first round by Lokomotiv Yaroslavl.
That was going to be a tough series anyway, but I think that kind of caps off the really difficult season Jokerit had with all their problems early on in the year. I think everybody expected them to, put up a fighting chance, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. So what's the latest on the Akbars Kazan game, Chris?
Yeah, so that is... I feel hesitant purely because I know what happened with the Lions the other week. I feel hesitant to call it.
Yeah.
But Akbars are 3-1 up and they are in the 18th minute of the third period.
Okay.
So, they've got 2 minutes left there. They're 2 goals to the good. So it's very likely that a broom will be there as well.
So 3 sweeps. How many other games are taking place today? Is it just 3 games taking place? There's 4 games. But Salavat Yuliyev against Tretzer Chelyabinsk was earlier today, so that game had already been put on when we talked about the KHL. Okay, earlier. So 3 out of the 4 games are looking like they might be a sweep. So it looks like the higher seeded teams have got the business done, and fair play to them. So there's nothing else we need to talk about now, is there, Chris? We covered everything now?
Okay. We're done. You can round up.
Perfect. So this time, I think it's a really good place to end today's episode of the EuroPuck podcast. Thank you for tuning in, guys, whether it be via the audio version on the various places you get your podcasts, or whether it be the video version on YouTube. Really appreciate it, guys. So thanks for stopping by. If you want to keep updated on all things Europuck podcast, or, send us your thoughts, opinions, or questions from today's show or for our next show, perhaps, then you can follow myself on Twitter at OddmanRushYT. You can follow Chris at Chris_Gadsby, or you can follow the show itself at Europuck Podcast, whether that be on Twitter or Instagram. And yeah, we'll be back next week to talk more playoffs, to talk more leagues going into the playoffs. To hopefully, maybe there's some imports that we've got to talk about with the Elite League. Because when does the Elite Series start with the Elite League?
April.
Do we know April what?
No.
No. Okay, so we've got about a month to go. So hopefully, teams are going to have to start signing players soon enough, aren't they? Because otherwise they're not going to get them here in time and have their quarantines done for them to be able to play in the league. So other than that, thanks for tuning in, guys. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.